Geomatics now, Bosho, good morning. Gesting on Mushkegowuk community, no semester coming, what you get it now. And so make a ship bag near George Nakogee, Margaret, Christina. That being to soak, I go to Stagite, but to see run it Taganan, being visit up. Okay, good morning, both. Welcome to our show.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank
so,
you.
yeah, what we'll do this morning is we'll go ahead and introduce yourselves and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I'm David Pearson. I hang out in Sudbury, that's where I live, and my background is as a geologist, but in the last 15 years I've become very interested and involved with climate change and climate change science, as well as with projects in which I'm collaborating with a group that we have at Laurentian that we call it Northland Climate, collaborating with First Nation communities in the north and with First Nation councils in the north. So I'm delighted to be here and speaking to you.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Metlin. I'm from Cree First Nation, and I'm the Climate Resiliency Coordinator for the Mushkegowuk Council. Like as Dave said there, we've partnered with Laurentian University and the Lands and Resources Department here at Mushkegowuk there to do a climate resistance adaptation plan involving the communities, including the communities, and hoping working with them to come up with a plan to combat what's going on in the world.
Okay, good morning again, and perhaps we'll go ahead and do our show, and then maybe we can talk about what we're here. So we're going to talk about maybe about climate change. So I'll let you go ahead and take it from there.
Well, thank you. Part of the reason I'm very interested in the Mushkegowuk communities and James Bay communities and the Hudson Bay communities is because it's a very, very unusual part of the coastline of Canada and the coastline of countries in the world, because it's rising. Since elders in the communities were born, the land on which they're stepping has risen about 20-25 centimeters. And the reason for that is that it's only 7, maybe 8,000 years ago that the ice sheet of the last ice age, which is about 2 kilometers thick, which pressed down on the land and made the mushy, rather fluid, rather mobile rock at about 25, 30, 40 kilometers down, moved to the side, moved to Prince Edward Island, moved to the prairies. Now that ice has melted, that rock, that mobile rock, is moving back from the east coast, moving back from the prairies, and the land is rising. Hudson Bay is getting smaller because the tidal flat around the coast is getting wider as the land rises. So I'm interested in that and interested in what the implications will be when you couple that fact with climate change, with, for example, the earlier spring and the later onset to winter, meaning that there might be ice that forms on the tidal flat, which is blown by strong winds over the still open water of the bay, and slabs of ice are thrown up onto the banks and maybe to the top of the banks, and perhaps cause difficulty and damage to cabins and any buildings that are close to the shore. So it's a very peculiar, very different, very unusual kind of coast, and that's part of the reason that I'm interested. And thinking of climate change on its own, I'm interested, and our group is interested in trying to contribute our understanding of the way that climate change is accelerating. Climate change is becoming more intense in its impacts, more severe in its impacts. And if you want to see an example of that, look at the wildfire season that's begun, which isn't to say that wildfire is going to be the big danger for the Mushkegowuk communities as it is in the prairies, but that's an example of the way that climate change impacts are becoming more severe, more extreme, and are accelerating And the reason why we have to find out as soon as we can through a project like this how much change people living in communities, especially elders with long memories of being on the land and what the land was like and how steep the banks of the rivers were when they were young. So that's the interest in the geological interest and the accelerating climate change interest that our group from Laurentian University up north on climate hopes to be able to contribute to the understandings that come out of this this project, and to be engaging with community members, especially elders, in conversations about what they've seen.
Thank you, sir. Nagumaga appreciation nga data kahamon kung nakanamutah tewi tabugan dite Christina kung menaga tutsige magahutte tapos yung nabatsigate gati coffee magakaski kanige niya na niya medjustin kanige sofi maganot to gaishe tashi here man gais obattaman hezite ke kiyot na kutte ke ganobattaman maga niya na niya medjustin na ko kendite ke yofi magak Egomagashin Sutunagnestia Kitotemagaski, Asat Kitotemaganski, Egomaga, Kakobate to Sigani Matistak, Tabascot need the economic Muscomi, Asat Aski Hatita Muscomi, Asamona Totamantagai Totamagopane, Westcatantega Must Mapagosana got it tickets of Nasan Mon Asanama, Monakan, Wakets and Daytana Muscomi, Egotantamaga Guy Tishin and Nasunatis together na mas komita bas ko de bis takas ko kaisit tashi here hinstabo kaisit notice tige kesi ko kiteke e gwana kakaga no bas tiga tige nistamaga pehte witam e notek e takaya at to few miste no mas komi miste e notek at atachi buat temishigito e gumaganis na hindi tige stikisken na and the Matan DC beaches now mistake in the maski, Egonobatum, Egonobatan, Pishiska, Bettewi, Takanmeno, Pishishi, Takandis now as she at the good of Temakas, at the Tubanidin Tavan, Nipi, Tentamnisti, Negomagashaga, Taganobata, take Aski, Aski to Temagan, Asamona, Page, John Soka, Page, Chokopana, West got it take. Minagot Tagonik is Kanazas Tagait, Kaisi Pasite, and it's all but the Mak gets in the Gabiano, with the Sagodashi beat to Snaukaski, on Magi on a 2 baby, Muni and made to would it take Kaisi Tiger and Machi, Mr. Sagodaga, had to know what a beat to Snauk with the Gigonic is Quimga, Homa Aski take on Magi on Omaga, but the Sikataguino, we paid the Natogus Kenzigat, Yabits. The mobbies to give no hit to get a bit to each to down the gave on how we not took his kids got take down this beach not mistake one. Kikishia ham no maganist to get to Mr. Diabets Hagan on it. Kagia what the mog when they asked them as be and the smagan, Egon but we know than this now. Then his beach niche sagaski, tabs with the work time at any wing, Spaban, Nistabogo, Ashi, and hit to give one. Tapan is to go as a dish power. I go on head to go on a guy going over to take and they take a bit to eat and they take who now. Go ahead.
If I can maybe add another concern, and Roxanne, my goodness, jump in if you want to make a point, please. One of our other concerns is that as climate change is accelerating, so temperatures, and one of the most important temperatures for communities anywhere, and certainly the Mushkegowuk communities, but also the Batawa and other communities in the councils across the far north, is the summer temperature. And when I look at projections in the Climate Atlas of Canada, which those of you who are good with your fingers on a keyboard might like to Google and follow the Climate Atlas of Canada. When I look at the maximum summer temperatures expected in the late 2040s and the 2050s, so when the children and the grandchildren of young people in communities today are growing up, I'm looking at, in Attawabiskat and in Moose Cree, for example, I'm looking at summer temperatures that might hit 39, 40, 41 degrees. Those can be lethal temperatures to people who have pre-existing conditions, especially heart conditions. And if the air is humid, then you have to add the humidex to those temperatures, and you might be looking at a humidex of 41, 42, 43. Those are dangerous, not just uncomfortable, but dangerous temperatures. They're the sort of temperatures which killed over 600 people in Vancouver a couple of years ago in the so-called heat dome, which the warmth came from the Pacific, an entirely different kind of atmospheric condition, and affects the Mushkegowuk communities, but nevertheless, the sorts of temperatures. And 95% of people who died, of those 600, died in their homes because their homes were not well insulated enough and they didn't have air conditioning. And those sorts of circumstances, it seems to me and to our group, have to be considered for the future of Northern Ontario communities, including the Mushkegowuk communities. How to adapt to those conditions means making sure that homes are well insulated, and there are ways of doing that which any good home builder would be able to tell you about. And also that there is the energy available in communities to provide air conditioning. And it may be air conditioning in community centres, not in every house, but the energy need is important too. And that raises the importance of preparing to protect, preparing to make sure that those in a community who are vulnerable, the very young, the very old, and those with pre-existing conditions, are considered in the preparation and the adaptations for summer temperatures. I think that that's an issue in the Mushkegowuk communities and right across the northern remote communities. It's a health impact that goes along with impacts like flooding from summer rainstorms, that goes along with wildfire issues as temperatures increase and ground dries. But it's an adaptation which is very possible for communities to engage in if you're ready, prepared, and get started right away.
Thank you, sir. The community take a position to Takamaganga Mutak. I got my baby with the Takanameno, Danis Pichi, Kistenda, and Usmanagat Nipik. I go my get the business in the Makashi, take a kishit, take a chicken. Kaikan go Panego, but Tahoiskat. This Westcat typical Nutana, Kakis to get. Can it teach now? Can I sit in the Modi take a no, but the high speech take. Ways can again the stomach and speech take in the hit time I got position. That was good taken over Taman Kakashaba 10 week Kakashaba take my guy who got that chicken was take Ekishaba take Peshkazaga and any Rutaman. You're gonna meet big young Kamamit in the man to Nista to Tian would take, but they get chicken take, get it down to that Gustadi down and then the Monday take an over take. Kikishi Hamino, the start Capishi to go as a ship. I want to get one night he would take us to wood that way go in the menu. Guys, peace to take the geek and toast in the bag would take. I got my big starts in the ways kite that's big out there has been to get how one of the Gido to Mr. Chicken and ask us to his speech to take. We go big Maggie on Egan, but take it, take it 20,000 coyes, Chikios chip. Nakahaman, Egishitik, one eat to make it take a beat to make a teach beat to make mistake. Kai speech to Kishonaman, you tiny saw what the money reach when I got take. Takisket to open my gate to a one now, cow is a stabana, cow is a staban, ask a hegananigate. takisken tuopana kuin nauhoittuikana tämän tekisnä kun taasman sekä naavatsekäitteik minä nämä kaikista saavatteikään ja enipik eukiskenaatisesta sekä ket hän tiitti heikut taasaamme tahtomatta ne kimitteen pähikuopana kuin hänet heikistä sitten käisistä sekä tiitti heikistä sinne käpehonoh ja kun nämä Weismäkeen opettavan ja naamme tahtomatta ne kanneke ennen kuin viikkoa hissinne puhuu ispitsikin sitten kun niittimme ja kaikenkin jääpätistä että puhuu takkipäänistä sekä hän meni tehdä sitten takaisin mikä piittä kun on kiepin ja kuhumäkin kun käytiin tää heitto ei mä mitään takkikin naapatsa ei mä mitään enemmän kaikenkin kirjoittuna käyttää että sekin se haakua asiassakin sitä kun saamme tehdä kuhukin kun ainakin kirjoitti Pentauksekan naapatsa käytiin vaapan työä niin no kun mä käytiin se kun eskäjäkään semmoista heitä että se mun nesteekiskenat ja kikiskenat sekä eskutti jo kaikki kapasiteetti vaan heistäkin vaan geneen tuttakin sekä naapatsa käytiin tämän teki tuot sekä tekevän hän heittui vaan eikä naapatsa käytiin ja kun minä peikä tähän. Alright, thank you for that, sir. In terms of that, maybe we can turn it over to Roxanne and she can explain her role in this project.
Yeah. So, as the adaptation, climate resiliency coordinator, I'll be working with the communities, and hopefully we are looking for an adaptation working group for a representative from each of the communities. And right now this is our first, what do you call it? First session, I guess, for these communities that we would like to be involved in this project. So we're looking to build on a working group and go to the communities and interview those people or any people there that can help us with any changes there that they've seen since they were children. Every year that they go onto the land, maybe they've seen something different occurring due to climate change. Maybe, just as Dave had mentioned there, like the lack of use there for air conditionings in people's homes now because the climate has changed and it's gotten so warm in the northern communities, and they need to, adapt. That's the adaptation is getting an air conditioning for your home there, and you've never needed an air conditioning before. Just other changes that you might have seen is that earlier flooding, shorter winters there because it's starting to rain. Spring kind of comes and then it doesn't come, and then it rains and then it snows, and you don't get complete freezing in the winter. Just changes like that have occurred throughout anyone's lifetime there throughout the past couple of years. From September to now, even, look what changes you might have seen that's different. We're looking to go to the communities there to interview community members there that can help us document these changes there so that we can look at it historically and kind of foresee what might be coming because it's getting, the climate's changing and it's getting warmer quicker. So these are the things that we'll be looking at there within the next couple of years. The working group that I'm looking for is, like I said, it would be a representative from each community that would help me to come into the communities, that would be able to collect the names of people there that would be interested to have this interview, and to make sure there that the information that they're sharing is secure. And Mushkegowuk has the hard drive, the service here to secure your information there. So we'd like to offer that out there to the communities. We want to work with the communities and make sure that they're involved in every aspect of this project.
All right, thank you, Roxanne. Ego paapasisa nga tahtahin kiwan gaana monta uno dite hiuta batsone no batsgatene ette viittaman dite kiwan gattisi babittisna kagite to gagimet ette batsgatte kiwan datte gattega kuiskaagmistahi jo battama hebebo monta poja hottanaasimissu pugunista pugo Matti kuunasko nästa puhukaakin ahotsin siinkin kuopattina tukimaskumittini eipä piittisnaakin vaan niin uudestaan ohtaavassa taasi mun ainakin ispanin enpi näyttökeskein mutta ei vaan hekin ei vaan pusittaa puhuinista puhuat ei näyttä kuimäkä ei pisesken tämän eikä soo kehittää niistä puhu and hit dog on him so we can over to get do. Gagumaga we beast up and hagan and go in the hanak. That was good me to give an over to get the gig on got to West Gag, Mr. Gagoma, but to some ways niche open them with Temagan. Take an over to get the maggot down on to Mobby Stag week. We not Domagan on Naga Bay go in the hand that 3 down to give away to start to give to mustn't hot in the hand of Joe in a stab in the hand gave a hagan. You want me to get taken now, Komagi gone down the mood to get to the mascot, you know, give us a skin in on that to go at chicken. Then the guys now go no company, they was a shade and a smagate dog at the man. There's the magate, the business skin them and they get tea, he can't take it. And I got hit to one go with Mark to but to get taken mistake, you know, debate to what we to strike, speak more be stag we that debate to each to get to it and speak him up and I know hit it down off. I go on get over to get that wheat tobacco no give on get much to get taken is to give on keep each of it done okay and they give on a guy hit it down off take got as a witness I got a bit to somebody mistake on you know mascot was it take skin on that way you got to get you mark to but to get take over the bad to mona Kishwamaga beast up and heavy again is the way maybe one in the hand could take that yeah but start. We know about the but thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry. So any more addition to any stuff? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just pick up on the important point that Roxanne was making about consulting and engaging with communities. Back between 2016 and 2019, our little group at Laurentian up north on climate, in fact, collaborated with Cree Geo. And we wrote together collaboratively vulnerability reports, climate change vulnerability reports, meaning what parts of the way that people live are vulnerable to climate change. We wrote those reports and they were confidential to the community. Confidential to the community. We didn't publish them. They didn't even go from us to the tribal council, to the Mushkegowuk Council, and we have permission from the communities now to use those reports as, you might think, a fairly recent baseline, a comparison for what we'll hear when Roxanne and her team go to communities to speak about what changes they've seen in the last 5 years. Because I think that those changes will exemplify, will show that climate change is indeed accelerating and that there are new impacts that are being felt. And for example, as the land rises, it raises riverbeds. Rivers do cut down into their beds as the land rises, but they prefer to move, if they can, sideways into the soft banks. And one of the consequences of that is that boulders that are on the bottom of riverbeds are lifted. And Pearson has already had to adapt to that problem. When people boat from the community to the bay, the boulders break the props of their boats if they're vertical props. So in fact, one of the adaptations which I think Sam Hunter introduced into Pearson is motors that are used in the swamps of Florida that you can pivot up, you can swing up as you know you're approaching boulders or a bank of boulders and the water is too shallow for your motor, you swivel it up. That's one of the adaptations that can be used for shallow water as a result of a combination of the land rising and there being a very dry summer. So that's a physical, geological impact that goes along with a climate change impact of dry summer, land rising, boulders appearing, adapting by changing your motor. One of the adaptations that's also available but not yet used in Northern Ontario, and I think that it's very appropriate that it be considered, is for the winter. When ice is thinner, then it becomes more dangerous. And you know, as well as I do, that people lose their lives every year from going through the ice on snow machines. And one of the ways of adapting that's being tested at the moment in the Northwest Territories by a colleague that I know in Memorial University, Trevor Bell, is an ice-penetrating radar machine, sensor that can be put on the front of a snowmobile that will sense the thickness of the ice over the underlying water. It's an adaptation or a modification of a technology that's been used in the Arctic. Smart ice is the name of the technology, for detecting the thickness of ice on seawater. Detecting the thickness of ice on fresh water is more difficult because the density difference, as physicists would call it, between the ice and the fresh water is less than the difference between the ice and seawater. So it's being tested, or was tested this last winter and the winter before in the Northwest Territories. That ice thickness detecting technology fitted on the front of a snowmobile can make it much safer for ice road builders to be constructing the ice thickness that's necessary for carrying trucks, tractor trailers even, across water bodies, going into Atawabaskat, for example. That technology is on the verge of being available. I think that it would be a very useful initiative of the Mushkegowuk Council. We are promoting an adaptation here that might need more consideration from a Mushkegowuk point of view. That's a very important life-saving technology. It's a precautionary technology. And that's the kind of technology that we need in order to deal with accelerating climate change, whether it's air conditioning for summer temperatures or whether it's instruments for detecting the thickness of ice that is more dangerous now than it used to be. Those are two technologies that are useful. And I want to give you a bit of context to the winter technology. Elders in Mushkegowuk communities, and others across the far north too, will have experienced somewhere between 30, 40, maybe even more, winter days and nights where the temperature went down to minus 30. The children of the children listening to this broadcast will speak to their grandparents about the days when minus 30 temperatures were experienced, because those children of the children that are listening, will never experience a day as cold as that. The winters of 2050 and on beyond that will not include days of minus 30. That will make road building, ice road building, very difficult, ice road construction very difficult. And that technology of the ice penetrating radar is going to be needed in order to, what can one say, to give an extended life to ice road building into the 2040s and 2050s. After that, and there are other communities in the north that are more vulnerable than Mushkegowuk communities, because a lot of your winter road is land-based. Those communities will not have any winter road after, I think it's like any reliable winter road after sometime in the, I think, 2040s. And that's an implication of climate change, which is not in the far distance. It's right in front of us. Right in front of us. That's where climate change is hitting us now.
Hello.
Sorry, you're on the phone there.
Yeah. You can go ahead and keep talking.
I can keep talking?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt with your conversation. So the extent of the change is,
okay.
What can one say? It's threatening, it's severe. When one looks at, especially at the next generation and the life that they will live, and that's for whom this work is really being done. It's the reason that I do the work. It's probably the reason that Roxanne does it, not so much for our own generation, but for the future generations. Because if we don't do it now, and that's adaptation, then the children of the future and the grandchildren of the future will be caught without the preparations and the adaptations that are necessary for well-being in their communities in the future. And that's what I'm talking about, is adaptation. It's not talking about cutting of greenhouse gases, because that needs to be done too. That needs to be done too. And the approaches that are coming out from some governments, especially the one just to the south of us, in opposition, in denial of the importance of dealing with the causes of climate change, which are the polluting gases that are emitted to the atmosphere from industrial processes. Those emissions need to be cut as well. But we have to adapt as well as reduce the polluting gases. And the main beneficiaries of that will be the children of the future in your communities. And I should say also that the visits to the communities, the engagement and the discussions and the writing of the summaries of those discussions and how much has changed, how quickly recently, they will become the presentation points, the report points that are presented by our representatives, by your representatives, as well as mine as a settler, but your representatives as the indigenous peoples, to be presented to those who can fund the work. The funding perhaps for the air conditioners, or the funding for the roads, or the air blimps, if those are what we employ for transportation in the north. The purpose of this exercise in my mind, the purpose of this project in my mind, is to strengthen the arguments that you can present that will spring loose the funding which is going to be necessary for the adaptations that will make life for your children and grandchildren comfortable. And that's what we owe. That's what we all owe them. We have to work on this together. And we owe it to your children, to my children, to the children of all Canadians. And that's how we need to see ourselves, as working together as Canadians.
Thank you, sir. So I'll translate that. Ako Mr. Mina, koti te iyan mo takiminga gieti asit tribuna kigona. Kibe ebetimi takubandi te Christine gana batsigate. Koti te nishite niyan sab nishite nagutase ebuch kimachtu no mo gobante batsimuna. Gana batsigate gutendi te emachtu nagate te batsimun omagatu go iskayak. Kato avattama hegiet to Wiskak, Tante Guy took the Mogopni, we know Hegiskin the Hegiet to Wiskad, Tante Guy she Bimatis took me what Hegiskin the Hegiet to Wiskayani, Egumago, Monoschi, Monoganagiosti, we Tamoguinahana, Tabascochi get the minister going to go with the Batsumunagi Matunagati, we know Bugigan and Tamogmoiste. Kiapat kanentamok, we know my Musagi kanentamok and hit the Batsimona, Monagan got to Mrs. Step and his darkness star, Chiminis chick, Abbott Hagan and Mushkegowuk take we know Giganentamok Shagumaga, as he eat a short tag on a Chiki Abbott static Chikiuchi, Abbott Stano, Homagat to Griskag, mistake on that dish now when again, as he give back the short tag in the menu. Market gave on get to Tagatik Nyan in the Hutana, Mascota, Ishikano, but Tagato, than this piece, Kate in the occasion, I will not open your mouth soon mouth to Nagati Kegona. Mini Pega Keganga get to Kiskanata get 8 Peters now, Eganova Tamakisi Pimino. In the Hepani, we shade to get somebody double squad and sticky Kiskanata Tagagio, beyond the Ganano, beyond the Gokate, Kiwi Tamadi take. Egistepente, Nasabe, is the boy, Guspepenta in hand, as she get a thick Mrs. Kendinano, and Mrs. Kuboka, Asiniak, Asiniak, Kitaka, and Nana, as she gets in the menu, is be we shade of tear, egon magasiittagan obattamak iattuufiimaga haski assaattuufiimagat mittinamagaasaatte uyattinaasipanunipi egon me pegegigon kagiskanaatistigaagit taabiskuut nimentiittehesaagudiittipehti iskentaago iattukueskaag misteemis mittinegegon Quand peganisiko no batta maskomi gaga no bakka no mak tapos ko dite heta de tisna hota de speech tia hotte hita te hotte ikpeske de nano asimitne te pitsna nesto buega no batta dite heta de sna ba metrin sigatio habat sihat sigate gigon tapos ko chigi astai no magigon gitskito machnigan hitte Twittamaguin tani speed tekanta maskomi hedet togopani egon egon abat sihatsigatek kegon dite hetsebehte geskende tani speed tekati tekati spani egon makegon an lotstano negoten statsmonumeno egon pege egon gagan obatskatek tani snagonoge kapehte wittamagun maga tani speed tekanta maskomi kaishipani skito maga giogetten mattoge egon tatsmogon pege kegon Tani sa kano batsigati. Apat tamni wat ni dite heways ketse sibi hutin bugni dite he gaisi siok nipi. Sa kano bigata makina dine dite hiote aga siok nipi. Kihe na dite he siapatistano kitatsumun dite sa gumagui na gaisi minasik nipi maut gaisi wasiag nipi dite he. Una tapu esko kihin and dite he animentago ginato giskinjigate than ispita tehanama ispita titan maskomi. Evani that's a good dite shiopo hit the hagan of Ataman, the good time they shimon upon the Gabazistan of me got to my goninato giskinjigate than ispita tehadite here de magina Gaishi minosicness to Gaishi minosic nipi Gaishi mani tabbing in dite how on my peg skin like Bega tepe ki monagani giottinige magancina to giskinjigate tani ispitatte and dite higono magat to gigonige gano batsigate but itat muta giusti pe match hegoina hanu ma bagistate gigon kitiskito manigan chigi guttilmani pampani begatsin sunati guspani hanu pege gagano battaga dite he minugattagi gagette giskon sigaget tabuskot Anotsugo asasaka pe matisik monotipikiskentamo kina nagagihtai bittine pupunutana kagispisit takayagod nagopane veiskata biskod nistumittena nemittene spisit takayag kay may kopipo anusmago ka pe matisik asasak nigan magitehe nigan tehe witabat mustatoi kutsasumsha osusmo monatagasketta dito etsuganustuma emamittendeman Kikitsit takaya dito tiga sagot ega ka sagot eki takaya gasi egon hitto gona awat nista ettipitat tai tihet pupunimes kana gosistai asumonat tagi hinjettu stanago pupunimes kana sagot asiette koiskaya mistahe egon ida tumutabsko tegana battakuina niano sapupun engo Asatat Montagi Tostano, Miscano, Sagot, Asiga, Asamonic Yahotin, Quays, Asamonat Tibiahotin, Gonidat, Monotapista, Gunchigius, Mescanagi, a Gonidat Mutnite, Nistot, and Hegon Robert, the Medi Pampani, or Tabat take me got a notice to get Chigon, Hegon, and Twenta, Chiki Pitin got take it, Hegon, Hegon, Nistagaru, Chiki Macanagay, Sagomagata, Tiabati, Chigatio. We go home, Sergey on the ways, Chigi Big Tickets, Kinsigat, Tignista, that they get to that take, but J. We stay now that it is data home about the Wiscar. Sir, thank you. Anything you want to add on, Roxanne?
Yeah, I do. Well, going back to what Dave had said earlier there about the climate atlas that you can see online, there's also a plant hardiness site, which you can access that online, but even for interviews there that we might want to discuss or talk with the elders or the people about what it predicts, what the plant hardiness site predicts or projects rather, that like Dave said, like in 50 years, plants are moving more north, are going to become obsolete totally. The blueberries or there's not going to be so many more blueberries or moving further north, but they're not going to be down like even in the Timmins area or maybe in the southern Ontario area. They're just plants are just going to start being obsolete. The Labrador tea is going to start falling out, going away because the climate is going to start getting so warm. The plants that we're not familiar with up here, coming from, say, northern United States, southern Ontario, are going to start growing. Just as people have said that they've seen, certain fish or certain bird species there coming up to northern Ontario, these things are projected to start changing or have been changing over the past few years. And the prediction for the next generations there to not know what's here now and to know what's coming up from southern Ontario they're going to be their reality. So even with the adaptations or adapting to these changes, there is like, how do we deal with somebody had mentioned at a meeting there that they're not familiar with porcupine. They came across a porcupine there, I think in Moose Factory. It's like, but in southern Ontario they know how to deal with porcupine. Or even around the Thessalon area, they know how to deal with porcupine, but they don't know how to deal with porcupine in Moose Factory. So how do people adapt to these changes in the plants and the animals that are coming further north just because the climate or the weather is getting warmer and the plants are adapting to moving further north? These are the changes there that, I've been hearing at meetings and discussions with people there, and we'd like to make sure that we got this information all documented. So it'd be really important there that we can get more information. And speaking of the changes there too, a couple of years back, from what I understand, they did aerial imagery over the coastline of the James Bay. And they're doing another one in July, from July 11th to the 16th. And they're going from Moose Factory up to Fort Severn over the course of those 6 days. And I guess they have the historical pictures from when they did the aerial imagery before. And they're going to be able to look at the difference from, I wish I knew the date when they did that aerial imagery, but they're going to look at the dates and how much changes have happened there in the erosion of the James Bay area. So that'll be coming up in July 11th to 16th. So if you see helicopters and planes out there taking pictures, then that's what they're going to be up there doing.
And if I could just add quickly, in response or in connection with what Roxanne's mentioning, a shout out to your Grand Chief Leo Friday for the interview that he gave from your annual meeting, I think it was in Sault Ste. Marie, just this week or maybe the end of last week, about the changes that he was hearing about and that he had noticed in the fauna and the flora, the plants and the animals. Speaking of birds appearing, for example, pelicans appearing in northern communities as far north as Fort Severn, vultures, pigeons also. And Roxanne mentioned blueberries. That's a very interesting projection for the distribution of blueberries. If you want to collect blueberries and you live in Sudbury, then you're going to have to get a plane ticket up to somewhere like Webequie or maybe even Fort Severn in order to gather blueberries at the end of the century. Now that's quite a ways off. And it could be that in fact some Mushkegowuk communities, and in fact some of the communities on the other side of James Bay and Uishi, could be developing maple syrup forests, maple syrup industry. The climate is becoming suitable for maple syrup production. And also, and Fort Albany is a good example of this, there's a terrific opportunity for local food growing. Fort Albany has a community garden, and there are family gardens too, where people are raising fresh vegetables that they eat in their family or they give to their neighbors and that are available in the community. That's a warming of the climate and a lengthening of the growing season, both at the spring end, but especially at the end in the fall, the lengthening of the fall season an opportunity that is beneficial to communities if you're beginning to grow food. One of the points that I would make, and I would make it not so much to your community councils, but to the politicians who make decisions about funding, is that providing a community with a greenhouse and not providing them with a community with the funding to support somebody to work in that greenhouse, working in a greenhouse and raising vegetables, whether it's in a greenhouse or it's in a community garden, is a job, and it needs to be considered as a job. And I think the funding that's being given to communities for putting up greenhouses and various structures to raise food needs to be complemented with where I think it's not sufficient now, complemented with funding to support a person whose job it is to do that.
Okay, sorry. I was just actually looking at a question here. I'm not sure if it's suitable for our show, but if you want to hear it, it's okay. Okay. It's a question from someone from up north, Adwabasca. I guess he's listening also in terms of talking about the all-season road and also the what's going to happen. Maybe it will turn into an all-season road comparing to like down the road we won't be able to build ice roads anymore. So his question was if these all-season roads are to get built, do we have the right to protect our land if someone decides to build a fishing resort?
There's no question about it, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. We're all treaty people, right? Those of us who are collaborating with a Western perspective from the university are just as much treaty people as those of you who are of First Nation birth and band members and so forth. And we all have a responsibility, all of us, and including the politicians who speak about this, we all have a responsibility to work, to abide by, to live with the treaties. And I happen to think that King Charles coming to make the throne speech was an indication of the depth to which the obligation to abide by the terms of treaties was emphasized. So my answer to the question, absolutely yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And I have another question. In terms of talking about climate change, right? I guess it mainly falls under that question. So what's your thoughts on Bill 5? And isn't the Ring of Fire right over one of the largest carbon sinks in Canada?
Well, my thoughts on Bill 5 are the same as the thoughts that we heard expressed in the provincial parliament yesterday by one of your elected representatives. I think that Bill 5 has been badly constructed because it did not involve discussion with First Nations before it was written. I think that Bill 5 is ill-conceived from that point of view, and I think that the potential loss of protection of endangered species and the sweeping aside of regulations which have been developed over decades in order to protect the values of the land and the creatures that are our neighbors and part of, as you would call it from your point of view, creation. I think that's very dangerous and very unwise. I think also with regard to the second part of your question, just remind me.
Carbon.
It's
Carbon sink.
and
Carbon sink.
Yeah, carbon sink.
The carbon sink of the James Bay lowlands, which refers to the amount of carbon that was taken out of the atmosphere once vegetation began to grow after the ice sheet melted 6, 7, probably as far back in some places as 8,000 years ago, that carbon taken from the atmosphere, put into plants that did not fully decay because the climate was so cold immediately after the ice had retreated, and became part of the soil, which has built up as the peat over 6,000 years to a couple of meters. That carbon is now, unfortunately, beginning to be converted into greenhouse gases because the permafrost is melting. And what happens is that as the permafrost melts, then microbes, which you may think would have died in those 6,000 years, but no, there are populations of microbes that become active as the peat thaws, and they begin to decay the carbon that's been stored in the lichens and in the mosses and so forth, and emit greenhouse gases. So in fact, unfortunately, as you fly into Fort Southern and look down at the ground, you're looking at what was a carbon store that is now, we believe from scientific investigation, is beginning to turn into a carbon source. It's past a tipping point that is of global significance, one of 16, 17 important global tipping points. So the carbon store is, oh goodness, what best to say? That is not going to be as big a loss as it would have been if the permafrost had not melted. But the permafrost has melted, we're losing it as a carbon store anyway, and it's hard to justify avoiding mining because of wanting to retain that as a carbon store, because it just isn't going in that direction any longer. So the point that's raised there is an interesting and complicated one, but the ground of the arguments is shifting because of the climate change consequences for the thawing of the permafrost. That is the reason that the carbon store has accumulated for 6,000 and 7,000 years.
But mining would only expedite that too, I mean, it's already going through that process, but mining obviously would just expedite that rather than just having it go naturally. If we allow for the roads to be built to go up to the Ring of Fire or whatever, then that would just expedite that process too.
Well, there are lots of discussions that will take place about the merits of the mining and the consequences, both positive and negative, for us all, as well as for First Nations. You know that there are some First Nations who are promoting the development of the Ring of Fire. They have good reasons for that. There are also communities, and I've talked to people in those communities who very much oppose the development of the Ring of Fire. Ironically, so there's a lot of discussion that needs to take place, that needs to take into account science, as well as the long-term social and economic well-being of the indigenous communities that are part of the regional assessment for the moment for the Ring of Fire. And those arguments will be long and complex, and it's that kind of consultation which I think is the kind of consultation that should have been built into Bill 5, for example, but is not built into Bill 5. So that's what I have to say about the Ring of Fire and Bill 5.
Okay, good answer. I couldn't have said it better myself. But all good. It's all good. It helps a lot in terms of knowing a lot of these stuff that a lot of us don't know, especially in terms of coastal communities. They do see a lot of changes, how they're living today compared to how my grandfather lived. Everything was so easy, but they had a hard time. They were starving back in the day with their parents. Now everything's coming back to how it was back in the day. We're going to see, some people are saying, we're going to see that change. It's coming. The change is coming. There's people coming after our lands. It's going to happen. That's what my grandfather, when he was a chief, he used to mention that a lot in terms of down the road, you guys will meet people that's going to come ask for what they're already, no more food for them to eat. Their plates are all not enough food on their table. They're going to come and say, hey, we're going to come take your food instead. And in terms, that's an example in terms of what do they want? They want minerals, they want our trees, meaning that's what the plate means, I guess, in terms of that. And I do see a lot of changes in terms of Timmins surrounding area. I have a camp on Nighthawk upriver, and I've seen so many people that don't know the river's changing, the ice thickness, everything else. I've saved probably, I wouldn't brag, but I say 10 people this winter going through ice almost and going through slushes. They think, oh, my snow machine turns into a boat. I tell them it doesn't work like that. So what I do, what I've learned from my grandparents and how they taught me to go out into the land, the changes of the water, the ice and all that kind of stuff. That's what I try to promote on Nighthawk River with these people that are driving around with their snow machines in the winter time. So I was talking to an M&R guy one time, and I told him, he came and talked to me, actually told me that we got your name from a guy that you helped, and he asked me, would you willing to help us in terms of trying to say which way do you go when you go to your river now compared to you used to go from here, but you don't do that. And a lot of these M&R officers are young, they're new to the land, they're new to the a lot of things, and like, you know, and I think it was good for them to come and ask me of my experience about the river. Even the fish is different, like certain spots in that Nighthawk I don't eat fish, but a lot of them do, and I said, hey, what are you guys doing? You shouldn't eat fish here. You guys know about the changes about that kind of stuff, right? And I think that'd be a good something for somebody to actually maybe perhaps do an educational for a lot of these rivers, because we just lost a young man not too long ago thinking that he can drive over a thin ice, like not too long ago, and haul it Lake Oed.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's not restricted to up here. Within a stone's throw of where I live, we lost somebody in, when was it, March, I think?
Yeah.
Driving over ice that he thought was thick enough, but didn't have the experience or didn't have the knowledge from talking with others who are older and travelled more than he had. Went through the ice and was lost.
Yes, for sure. So we got about, actually we're time's up, Ron. Thanks for the signal. So anyways, thanks for your time and always your information. It's always good to have a lot of information for future changes. Like, we'll love to have you back again soon, and we'll take it from there.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'd love to come back, and not just to talk information, but
Yeah.
to share opinions. As you will have gathered, I have some fairly strong ones, and I'm looking forward to the conversations in the communities as well. I hope I'll be able to be there as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for
So
sure.
can I just say
Yeah,
that
for
if there's anybody out there in the communities there that want to be part of the working group there, just give us a call here at Mushkegowuk or email me, rmetlin@mushkegowuk.ca, and you can we'll get together and start discussing what we can do with the communities when we can start coming up and interviewing the people. Thank you.
Okay, English, Mr. Minagin, Dr. Megadotsu Magi Tibatsumano, what she would time, see what time, and you can take it at the bait to each got you. na going again with the English watching. Thank you, Ron, and then in George Nakogee watching time say English watching. I give it to watching.
Okay.